Don't tell me that the moon is shining. Show me the glint of light on broken glass.
Hello and welcome to Shining Moon episode 40. I'm your host, Deborah L. David. With me today are AP Howell, Sam W. Pisciotta, AT Sayre, and Risa Wolf. The voting for the Nebulas has just concluded, and we're here to talk about the contenders on the ballot before the winners are revealed. Let's get started with some introductions. AP Howell lives with her spouse and their two kids and a pair of energetic puppers whom we may or may not hear in the background periodically throughout this podcast today. Her non-parenting jobs have spanned the alphabet from archivist to webmaster. Howell's short fiction has appeared in such places as Daily Science Fiction, Little Blue Marble, Underland Arcana, Insomnio, Bicycles and Broomsticks, and Darkness Blooms. Some of these are lovely names for anthologies and magazines. For information on published works, links to social media accounts, and similar things, please visit her website at aphowell.com. Welcome, AP. Is there a name that you'd like me to call you besides your initials?
AP's fine, or a Dane, either way.
I'm gonna stick with AP because I'm not sure I'm gonna say it the right way. All right, Sam W. Pisciotta is an intrepid storyteller hurtling through space-time on the power of morning coffee and late-night tea. He writes stories for people who want to visit other planets, learn magic from birds, or camp in haunted forests. His MA in literary stories from the University of Colorado trained him to deconstruct a variety of texts. Living life taught him how to put them back together. Sam is a graduate of the Odyssey writing program. His work has been published in Analog, Asimov's, Podcast with a magazine of science fiction and fantasy, and other fine publications. Connect with him at www.silo34.com and at Silo34 on X and Instagram. Welcome to the podcast, Sam.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to talking about these stories.
Well, it's a pleasure to having you back. You always have wonderful things to say, and I'm looking forward to your insights. A.T. Sayre has been writing in some form or another ever since he was 10 years old. His work has appeared in The Cosmic Background, Aureolus, Haven Speculative, and most notably in Analog magazine, where his debut novel, The Last Days of Good People, will be published in the July-August 2022 issue, with an audiobook from Dreamscape and an ebook following shortly thereafter. His first short story collection, Signals in the Attic, comes out May 20th from Lefty Press. Born in Kansas City, raised in New Hampshire, he lives in Brooklyn and likes to read in coffee houses. Welcome to the podcast, Andy. It's been a while since you've been on.
Oh, I know. Thank you for having me back. We had so much fun the last time.
Yeah, we did. Risa Wolf is a multi-gendered water elemental disguised as an ink-stained lycanthrope, and that is still the best intro that I've ever read. They come from a burned-over district in upstate New York, and they imagine the houses for book ghosts for a living. Their writing can be found in Apex, Clarkesworld, and Diabolical Plots, among others. Visit them at killerpuppytales.com. Welcome back, Risa.
Thank you so much. I am thrilled to be back.
All right, we are going to dive right into this. We've got a number of stories to cover, and all of them are intriguing, and I look forward to discussing each one of them in depth. So the first one is by friend of the podcast, P.A. Cornell. Patty has been on a number of times, and I'm very pleased that she has had this opportunity to shine in front of the whole world. The story is Once Upon a Time at the Oakmont. It appeared in Fantasy magazine in the October issue of 2023. In this story that flirts with the liminality of time, a woman of the present lives in an apartment building built over a time vortex. She's fallen in love with the current resident, a man from the 1940s, and with the U.S. entry to World War II looming in his time, she's faced with the inflexible rules of their apartment association. Thou shalt not tell others what their futures hold. When he ships out for war, she's sent into a catalepsy of fear. Letters come for her, age brown, telling her what's been transpiring for him on the battle lines until the letters stop. Then and only then does she get to know her neighbor from her future, a young man who turns out to be her son, who's been under strict instructions from his father to tuck letters under the door every so often. And only after her beloved returns from war is she evicted for being pregnant. Away from the Oakmont, her memories fade, but there's the hope that in the future she might be able to return. Wow, I thought this was emotionally affecting, and I thought it braided together the times very well. What did all of you think? And we're going to start at the top with the first person on my screen, which is Andy Sayre. What did you think about this story?
Oh, honestly, like everything Patty writes, I loved it. Uh, I'm not. My cold black heart doesn't really get into the romance stuff very often, but when it's written as well as Patty writes, it's much easier to do. The thing that I like most about this story is the sort of the finite situation with everything is like the relationship that is going to end at some point.
Hmm.
Everything's going to end, everything's going to change, and it's just sort of like the way that everybody is very much aware of it. You're not going to be able to stay at the Oakmont forever.
Hmm.
Her relationship is not going to last forever because he's not even from the same time period. They're always going to end, but she does them anyways, and it's this sort of like bittersweet wonderfulness of the way that Patty writes it. That
Hmm.
really I think is one of the stronger things I've read all year,
Hmm.
and it's just it got through to my cold black heart. So this it just that in itself is an accomplishment.
Yeah, right. So, what did you think of this story?
So I will echo Andy that Patty just does wonderful things. And this seems to be the year of Patty. I am so excited for her.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
really excited. Honestly, Once Upon a Time at the Oakmont is not my favorite of hers. It's
Hmm.
beautiful. It is well written. It is extraordinary. There are a few things in there that, as somebody who is multigender, it's like, okay, so if why weren't both of them evicted? Why was only one of them
Yeah.
evicted, right? But that is like the only complaint I had, for this like really marvelous, well structured, and a really thoughtful concept of what time travel would look like,
Hmm.
right? Like, because it is time travel. The time vortex is a form of time travel, and I don't normally think of time travels in that way, but I thought it was really beautifully rendered. And
Hmm.
in particular, I loved the details of, for instance, everybody watching the moon landing live, except for
Yeah.
those who weren't
Yeah.
allowed to because it doesn't touch their time. And I just thought there was
Yeah.
something really extraordinary seeing how different people reacted different ways to these things that were so time bound.
Hmm.
I thought that was really remarkable and lovely.
Sam, how about you? What did you like about this story?
Yeah, for me, it's hard to write time travel because there's people reuse ideas so much, and I thought this one was really unique. And
Hmm.
while I was reading, I was very envious. Like, she came up with such a great idea, right? So, and writers do that, I think. But it's an amazing idea. I think, even though you've got all of these different times going, too, I think she grounds it in that 1940s, and that sort
Hmm.
of is the sort of the touchstone for the piece, and I think that helps make it work and make it stronger. Um, I also agree with Andy that you have this sense that it's going to end, and you know that it's going to end,
Hmm.
but you don't know how it's going to end also. So is Roger going to die in the war, which I kind of expected in some ways, and then or not, and so that keeps you on the tension up, I think, as well. So it was
Yeah.
well done. Yeah.
And AP, how about you? What did you like about this one?
Um, yeah, I agree that that the sort of the groundedness, the very you know close third perspective is something that Patty does very well. And in this one, what I liked was this is a very liminal. The Oakmont is very liminal,
Hmm.
and the specifics of time travel are just hand waved as there's a time vortex,
Yeah.
um so all of the rules that are in place are, they're very they are created by humans, not by not by the physics involved. And I liked the way that everybody knows and more or less respects the rules, except when they don't. And that it's like, okay, yes, this does read like people dealing with their HOA sort of thing. And I really liked, again, I felt like that really really sort of grounded things, where everybody sort of knows which rules you can bend and which ones you shouldn't bend,
Mhm.
and stuff like that. So that was it was a nice way of sidestepping the issue of a lot of time travel stories, just like a lot of like a lot of more of the harder science story. It's like, okay, we have to explain how the FTL drive works or something. It's like, no, you don't.
Yeah.
It
Mm.
just
So
tell us it works.
you can tell us it works, and you can just leave the sheet over the machinery. You
Yep.
don't have to get your hands actually dirty. You don't have to get the oil under your fingernails to
Mhm.
explain how this works.
Yeah.
It can just
Mm.
work.
Yes, you can just repeat to yourself that it's just a show and you really should relax.
Yes, exactly.
Yes. Which is,
Some
of
of
course, a
these,
show that you can't see, that you can't watch immediately after you watch the moon landing all as a group, because some people can't come into your room. But
Yes, exactly.
yeah, I love the
Oh,
rules that she has. That, I mean, those rules are set in place for that type of thing, and that in a sense is a way of explaining how the hotel works. And I love
Mhm.
that the numbers match the year that you're
hmm
Mhm.
yeah,
typically in, things like that. And
And
yeah,
that things will change over time,
yeah,
and your number will change over time, and you'll just not notice it changing. Things like that.
yeah,
I liked little details like the couple looking out their window and each of them describing what they see on New
yeah,
Year's Eve to each other, because that does break the rules technically, but it's also a way of bonding. And it's beautiful. And again, liminal is the word that keeps coming to mind for this. And just her relationship with the other people
Mhm.
besides her love interest are very realistic to neighbors, because she has movie nights and the moon landing night with somebody from 1969 and somebody from 1972, and then you've got the woman who's teaching disco dancing at a roller rink is saying, "Well, my boyfriend's closing down the roller rink and he wants to open up a video store, something called a video store. Do you think this is going to work out?" I can't tell you.
yeah.
Well, I mean, the thing that's nice, it's like a lot of times when you have one of these stories, like as AP said, where you don't like have everything explained. It's nice that it's because when you read a story like this, even though Patty doesn't explain it, you get the feeling that she already knows these rules. She just is like she really thought out the rules of this
hmm
Mhm.
hotel of this
Yeah.
apartment building. She just didn't need to just didn't actually put them in the story. And that's something I always think is really good when a writer does that, because even if you're not going to explain in detail how the faster and light drive works, the writer should know, because that will influence the wording that you use and will influence
Mhm.
the things that you will say in your story. So it's
Mhm.
good that the writer actually does know what the rules are, and you get the feeling from reading this that Patty did actually sit down and really thought out the rules and how everything works to a detail that she probably had no intention to ever actually put into the story.
Yeah.
But
And
you can see it under the drapery, because you
Mhm.
can see the shape of it, or you can see the impression left by it.
Mhm.
You can see the footsteps of it in the grass, but you don't have to see that to know that the monster's been there. So it allows the reader to infer more things very gracefully, I find.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But and I envy her that gift because I don't have it.
yeah, and really, it's in this case, the all of the characters sell the conceit more effectively than anything else. That just
Mhm.
clearly everybody has bought in. And that's also sort of an interesting thing to me, because the idea of, oh, you'll just lose a chunk of memories, like in so many other stories that would be the crux, that would be
Hmm.
the horror component, um
Yes.
of the, you could have an entire story of somebody, like somebody agonizing over, do you want to sign this lease?
Hmm.
Whereas this, it's just sort of, we're never told what brings people to the Oakmont, but it must be, they must be in a really sort of really lost emotional place.
Hmm.
And I like the fact that whatever those traumas are, just fade in importance. That this is such an interesting healing space for
Yeah.
people.
And yet it also reaches out past the Oakmont. The moment in the
Hmm.
grocery store,
Yeah.
Yes.
that was in there I had a moment of like, but wait, and then I realized like, but they're still in the same neighborhood and they're given this gift of being able to
Hmm.
remember just in this singular
Hmm.
moment, and then it's
Hmm.
gone. And I thought
Yep.
that was such a beautiful moment of the rules exist, but it's not there to be cruel. We will let you
Hmm.
see
Yes.
when you need to see, when you need to have
Yeah.
that moment. I thought that was a really beautiful touch point there, that it's
That's
not only hotel
Again,
bound.
it's a state of grace,
Hmm. Hmm.
and it is, and it permeates the whole story, and it is really wonderful. And I'm wishing I had read this earlier than here at the end of the year, because then I could have talked to Patty about it on previous broadcasts. With your guys' permission, we're going to move to the next story, which is
Hmm.
Merle and the Farmhand 4200 by R.S.A. Garcia. It appeared in Uncanny uh, in July, August of 23. This story is written in Trinidadian Creole, which adds verve and life to the tale. Tanta Merle has grown old in her house and no longer has children or grandchildren nearby to help her with her needs, so one of her children sends her a Farmhand 4200, an AI-enabled robot with nanobot capabilities whose primary function is supposed to be to help tie up her goat, Ignatius, after letting the animal eat and weedy lie all day. Tanta Merle treats her farm bot from the beginning like a person, giving it her late husband's name, Lincoln, and showing genuine concern when the goat repeatedly eats the bite. Lincoln experiences repeated leaps in cognitive function in dealing with her and her recalcitrant goat, and all the farm bots that he's networked to want to be treated the way Tanta Merle treats him. In the end, he becomes a person, and so do the rest of the bots. He even figures out a way to keep the stubborn goat from eating him anymore. I really enjoyed this story. I've been really blessed by a couple of stories in Trinidadian Creole this past year. One of them was Duin,
Oh,
and that was really, really good. And this one's also really, really good, but completely different because the other one was very dark, and this one is all light. So, what did we think of this one, and what did you like? And let's just talk about this for a little while. Let's start with AP Howell this time because I'm going to start at the bottom and work my way up.
Okay. Yeah, I loved the Creole. Just the rhythm of the story was fantastic.
Mhm,
And yeah, I agree. This one is all sweetness and light. No, you know, reaching in and squeezing your organs and tearing out your heart
mhm,
or anything. Um, but I liked it this year when the problems of generative AI and whatnot are
yes.
so high on the list of concerns.
Yeah.
I love this sort of uh, it's not even a throwback really. It's just this is a very science fictional take on an AI that is a person.
Mhm,
And
yes.
I love the fact that I guess I love the fact that this is not a topical story about AI, but it is a very
Mhm,
topical story about a lot of other issues, and including
yes.
you know including far-flung families and
There was there's
elder care.
there's elder care. There's a little bit of
Y-
climate change in there,
Yep.
just in passing,
Yeah. I
just
and
for
I
flavor.
Yeah, and then the labor issues. um
Yes.
um so I but I love how even though it takes on those weighty things, it is just a delightful story. It's
Yeah.
I mean, one of the main characters gets repeatedly eaten by a goat. What's not to like about that?
Sam, what did you like about this one?
Oh, the first time I read it, I bounced off of it a little because of the language, I think.
Mhm.
And
Hmm.
I went at it again the second time and loved it. So once I got into the rhythm of that, the
Hmm.
story is excellent. I love the benign antagonist of the goat. I thought that was genius as the problem solving. And um, uh, the protagonist, I mean, is so well developed too, Tantie May,
Hmm.
and she just comes to life throughout the story because of her interaction with the goat and family, and then the AI as well. And I agree, like you have this really great story of this AI, and it's another sort of it's like the time travel with
Hmm.
Patty's. So it was sort of a unique way of of coming at it. This is another one that's coming at AI in a unique way, and
Hmm.
which is why we're talking about it, I think. And it's just, but it's also has that underlying sort of, you know, sort of here's a group of AI that are trying to find individuation and freedom from labor and all of that. So there is that sort of that darkness underneath it as well. But it's on the top. It's very entertaining. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
We've talked a lot about cozy fantasy and cozy science fiction this past year because it's having a moment. And
Mhm.
this story definitely hits most of the beats for that. It has the coming together of community, a communals, a response to things. It has the small stakes, small goals, but achievable things, that sort of thing. And so it's definitely a cozy, but it does have that underpinning. Ooh, that's a real thing. That's something we can pull on if we want to, and we'll see the darkness under it. But we're going to wrap a shawl around it, and we're going to make it okay.
Yeah, you've got an
Risa, I'm sorry.
group basically. I mean, the whole all of those AI are being forced to work, I guess, as they're developing. And the question is, are
Yeah,
they being allowed to um
become.
in- yeah, to become individuals? But she allows it, and
Yeah,
she's a model for what it could be in a
she's
sense.
the only one who's given them a name, for God's sake. She's the
Yeah.
only person who's treated them like people. What does
I,
that say about the rest of the humans who have these things?
well,
Not good things.
I confess I have a hard time nobody else thinking nobody else has named them or like stuck stickers or googly eyes on them, even if they don't think they're human or don't think they're a person. Somebody has tricked out their farmhand.
Yes, I would expect so, but yes. Risa, how about you? What did you think of this one?
Oh, I love it. I usually love Rhonda's work. It's just so extraordinary. My biggest thing, the thing that I loved the most, is the conceit of the interview. The conceit of, I'm here, I'm telling you a story because you came and asked about it, but I'm not going to give you the simple answers. I am going to
Hmm.
tell it to you straight. I am not going to sugarcoat anything. And it's like, yes, I agree, it's a cozy fantasy, and yet it is still a David versus Goliath
It
story,
is.
right?
Yeah.
It is a like person against the world that wants some interpretation that the story
Hmm.
refuses to give. And I always love those types of
Yeah.
stories. I love that aspect of people have small problems that end up being profound.
Yeah.
And the profundity is not up to other people to define. And I really love that claiming.
And that is where the story ends, where she specifically tells the interviewer, anything else you want to ask him, that's not my story to tell.
Hmm.
He's a person. You have to ask him yourself.
Yeah, and
And
also like you have to
reframes
ask
it so beautifully.
permission. You have to ask permission
Yeah.
to ask, right? I love that. I
Yeah.
agree.
Andy, what did you think of the story?
Well, I'm going last. I mean, everything I liked about it, someone's already mentioned. But no, I mean, I am a sucker for a small stake story. I love small stake stories. having been someone who's written a couple of them myself, and it feels more. I mean, it's weird to say in science fiction, but it feels more realistic when it's a small stake story because not everything has to have the fate of the universe as hangs in the balance, and
Yeah.
it's just
Mhm.
the story about this old woman who's has an empty nest, and basically there comes together with this AI that becomes their new closest friend, and the struggles to be able to incorporate them into their farm and become sentient. It's a nice little combination of various different ideas put together. I think really they blend really well together.
They really do.
It really blends these multiple different ideas put together in this one story, almost to the point where it's so seamless you don't even realize. Oh wait a sec, that's not the same idea as it just in the last paragraph. This is a whole new idea that she's getting into. How dare you be this talented? It's really well written. I mean, again, honestly, I'm not the whole like nobody has everybody's a really nice person type of story. It does kind of that does strain my credulity a little bit because I'm again cold black heart. But when it's done as well as this, it's okay, and I don't mind it as much. When
Yeah.
it has, as far
It
as
definitely does not. It definitely does not come across as saccharine in any way, shape, or form. It
no,
comes
no,
across as
definitely not
very
saccharine.
genuine.
It's definitely not saccharine, but it's basically it's like populated by people from the Federation. So it's like everybody's a really nice person. Nobody's terrible. Nobody's selfish or greedy or stupid. And
They're all off
sometimes that
screen in
rubs me the
this.
wrong way, but again, when it's written this well, it doesn't bother me so much.
And also I find that like the smaller cast really helps that
Yeah.
that and also the fact that she's so isolated. um
Mhm.
she doesn't have a lot of interactions with other people. So that means that I have an easier time believing that the community is basically pretty nice, but also clearly she is surrounded by human beings, and some of them are not going to be so nice all the time, but she is modeling a a certain generally positive approach to life, and that's what the what the second main character picks up on.
And since you touched on this, I'm going to point out that this does point to the profound loneliness and isolation of old age,
Mhm,
because it is gently and gracefully touched upon. It is not dwelt upon, but because the AI, the robot Lincoln, is able to do just simple things like, hey, we're going to set up your holodeck here so that
mhm,
your family's videos that they've been sending you of your grandchildren growing up, now you're going to be able to experience that. And you've just been letting them sit there because you don't know how to use the technology that would
mhm.
ease the loneliness. And it is this assistive, adaptive technology that's portrayed in a very positive way, which is refreshing in an era, as others have pointed on, where we're feeling threatened by AI, and at least by the large language models that take the name of AI at the moment, which they
Yes.
aren't really.
And I also found it interesting to sort of think, um, she's clearly an atypical owner of
Hmm.
this type of unit. Um, so again, part of other people presumably have more like business oriented things. They're seeing this, they have a reason to see it as an appliance.
Hmm.
But she's the only one who has the need to see the Farmhand 4200 as Lincoln. And also I was sort of wondering if it was hinting with the fact that she was not great at dealing with technology on her own.
Hmm.
If it was sort of, if the story was kind of opening the door for you know to basically say, let's have some different perspectives on tech,
Hmm.
because everybody who interacts with it is going to see it from a different perspective, interact with it in a different way.
Yeah.
And and that's when that's when you really know what the full use case is of something.
Yeah.
And and you might be pleasantly surprised. It might not be a Terminator in the box. It might be Lincoln.
It reminds me
Yeah.
of there was this old Twilight Zone episode where the guy's imprisoned on a planet and they send an
Oh
AI.
yeah. Okay.
Right. It's
Yeah, I
sort
know
of in
what you're
that
talking
same
about.
vein of, you know, making friends with the AI. So Tantie Merle is, able to find a relationship. In a way, like all of these stories are about characters and relationships with others. And
Yes, they
her
are.
relationship
Yeah.
is with, the farmhand,
Of course,
AI.
there's the Ray Bradbury Twilight episode too. I Sing the Body Electric,
Hmm.
which is also a very similar type of theme.
Right.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite Twilight Zone episode, to be honest, but I did. But it's Ray Bradbury, so you give it a little bit.
You
Yeah.
have to give it a shout out.
Really.
All right, we're going to move on to our third story, which is Window Boy by Thomas Hoffman. It appeared in Clarkesworld, August 2023. Jakey is a young boy who lives in a world in which company men like his father never really leave the safety of their houses, and neither do their families. Packages come to the house delivered by cyborg mailmen that have to fight off mutants known as grackles. Jakey's made a friend, a boy who sometimes comes to the window to talk to him. Jakey gives him food through the package delivery box, and the window boy asks him if he'd be willing to turn off the electric fence so that he, and only he, would have someplace safe to go to the next night. But Jakey sees the men watching the window boy, hungry, scary men, and he doesn't turn off the fence. The men, perhaps fleeing one of those mutant grackles, and perhaps wanting what's in the house, try to get in over the fence and die. And Jakey decides then and there that he's going to stop fighting his parents about being sent away to school, and that he'll accept his fate as a company man, just like his father, because the grackles are always outside, watching and waiting. This story does a lot with inference. It's a very dark story. What did we think about this one? I'm going to start this time with Risa.
So I always have a hard time with stories in which children are hurt. So the boy at the window just tore me apart in the worst possible way.
Oh,
But
yeah.
at the same time, I really love the concept of, because the description that you talked about, my impression was that all of the houses are deep underground, deep
Yeah.
underground. And that concept of like the mutants are so dangerous that that's what you need to do. You cannot live outside. Your windows are just like videos, they're video feeds. And I just thought that aspect of the grackles are just so freaking terrifying that everybody lives in bunkers, even though there hasn't been like there's the implication that there was a nuclear war or some type of radiation, but it's not explicit. And so it just becomes this really fascinating meditation on what you do to survive. Very, very hard for me. Very hard for me.
Yeah.
But it was so well done.
The next story that we're going to cover, which is The Sound of Children Screaming, was an incredibly hard read for me. I bounced so hard off of it in so many ways, so I'm sure that you did as well,
Yep.
for much the same reasons.
Mhm.
But the window boy was definitely interesting. There's a point in time where the window boy asks the boy at the window, Jakey, if he does live underground, and Jakey hesitates and he refuses to answer because he's been cautioned against telling strangers anything. Don't show them what you have, that sort of
Mhm.
thing. And that to me resonated on the level of privileged versus underprivileged people and everything like that. So there's a lot going on with that. But I'm going to shut up and let you guys talk. Sam, what about you? What did you think of this one?
Oh, I love this. This is one of my favorites. And by the way, Kate Baker reading it also, but she did an incredible job of reading it. But the that again relationship, but it's really a statement about class, and it had so much to say about society, I thought, and that's in terms of that we can even think about in terms of our own society right now. But the relationship between those boys, and it was interesting. I mean, it developed, and then by the end, it sort of twists, and you wonder, well, how much of it was genuine? Like, how much was the boy outside the window being manipulated, or was he manipulated later? So you don't know it, just like Jakey doesn't know, right?
Yeah.
And and then in the end, I mean, they're just prisoners of their class. I mean, they keep going, and nothing
Yeah.
changes for either. So it was a great
Yeah.
story. Yeah.
AP, you have your hand up like you want to go next.
Oh, sorry. I was scratching my head, but I'm happy to go
Okay.
next.
Okay.
um, 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 uh, yeah. One thing that I liked about this story is that uh, it's sort of the inactive protagonist.
Mhm.
In that Jakey never, he has conversations, but he never actually lets anyone in. His decision is stay the course. So
Mhm.
the entire arc is so tightly internalized, and yet
Mhm.
this is clearly going to be like a this is a turning point in his life
Yeah.
where he makes a decision, and you get the sense that he's not going to go back on this. He's not going to try to figure out what's up with the Grackles. He's not going to probably have many more interactions with the mailman. He's gonna follow the path.
Mhm.
So I from the perspective of small stories are great, even when they're horribly dark. um the other thing that I loved is that all the is the idea that his class is not only insulated by being in the bunker, but they can choose how much they see of what's
Mhm.
going on outside, and
Yeah.
how that is both that both increases their comfort and also increases their danger, because they
Mhm.
don't know what's out there. So you know so it's hard to know how to react to things. But I just um yeah, I loved how the only way, you can have the pseudo bliss of ignorance, but if you do that, then you absolutely have to follow these rules. And if you're considering doing anything else, then you have to be more careful, and you have to sort of sample the darkness. um and I thought that was great. And the sort of whatever was going on between the parents, that
Yeah.
it felt
That
very
mystery.
it felt very sort of like, flashback to the 50s style.
Mhm.
um the standard 50s marriage,
Mhm.
marital difficulties. But yeah, you do wonder, in the society, it's like, okay, how how does this marriage work? Well, it's clearly not working well, but how did they get together? It's like, there are
What
lots
was
of
their life before she? What was their life like before she started taking the quick sleep pills every time she turns around?
yes,
Yeah.
and it's
Why does she take
where
those pills? What makes life so unbearable when this is the status quo? Or is that
yeah,
what is makes life so unbearable? Yeah.
yeah,
It's really intriguing.
yeah. So just lots of little details like that, that are gestured at, but they're not part of it's a very tightly focused story, which I like. but
Yeah.
but there's still a
Very,
sense
very, very
that,
tight point of view. It's very limited to what the kid can know, which
yeah,
is not much.
not much, but we still definitely have a sense of
Yeah.
stuff that's going on out there.
Yeah, again, like we said earlier, you see the shape of the monster as a shadow on the wall going by, but you don't see the monster itself. You don't know what this
Mhm,
grackle is. You don't know what the unseen forces are around them. You just feel them tightening, ever
mhm,
and making it more and more claustrophobic as the story goes on.
mhm.
And Andrew, how about you? What did you like? Again, I'm making you go at the end. I'm
I know
sorry.
it's okay. It's yeah, this was one of my favorite stories of all the nominees. This was there was, without saying exactly which one I voted for, this is one of maybe three or four that I went back and forth with several times before I finalized my ballot, which was more just like I was too tired of trying to reconsider and change it again. But yeah, this was one of the ones that gave me a lot of pause. That was definitely one of my favorites. I love the commentary on class that is
Mhm.
that is the backbone of this story, is very solid. You know, the 50s almost nuclear family, with no pun intended,
Hmm.
set up with a family. But the other thing I love about it is the fact that it's a class. It would be so easy in a story like this to make somebody the bad guy, to make
Hmm.
Yeah.
Jakey's parents the terrible people who basically are at fault for this. And
They're
the fact,
not.
yeah, they're not. They're just as much a victim. Well, they're not the same kind of victims as the people who are stuck outside, but they're still victims too. They're in a prison. The,
Hmm.
the people outside are in a hellscape. They're in a prison. They're both not doing well. But
Yeah.
none of them have any easy way of being able to. None of them see a way to get out of their predicament. They're all
Hmm.
victims in this, and I love that idea in this because I kind of get another thing that I get tired of is the whole us versus them type of mentality that there is in a lot of stories that you see, especially when it's
Hmm.
talking about classism. It's always like, oh, it's like, oh, the rich people, it's all their fault. They're terrible. Everything's their fault. Or, oh, it's the poor people. It's the welfare queens. Or it's like blaming somebody. It gets tiresome after a while. And I love the fact that the story actually looks at it and says like, look, this is not a great situation for anyone. Nobody's really at fault, and nobody really can figure out a way out of it. And that's kind of like that's the realization think that Jakey has in the stories. He realizes this situation is not good for anybody, and I'm already stuck in it now as a kid. I don't have
Hmm.
any way of getting out of this, so I'm going to have to just go the same path my dad did because it's a prison, but at least it's not a hellscape. And I
Yeah.
love the fact that the story does that. It doesn't blame anyone. It's just this situation is terrible. It's not really anybody's fault except for maybe all of ours fault, if anything.
Yeah, it's talking about systemic problems as opposed to uh, a different story entirely would be one where Jakey solves the problem and becomes the hero and is the active protagonist and everything like that. It would not be the same story at all, and I don't think it would be nearly as effective. This is a quiet story with an incredible tension about real issues, just told in a science fiction
Yeah.
context. So
And also, again, small stakes. If you really look at
yeah.
the story, is small, another small stake story. The fate of the universe hangs in the balance of anything anybody does in this. They're all just kind of like victims of what bigger people are doing.
And also, um, we don't have an exact timeline, but we know that, that dad was watching Rachael cartoons from his youth. So it's like
Mhm.
this is a very long stand,
Yeah,
it's an ongoing systemic issue. It's
yeah.
um yeah.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to move on to The Sound of Children Screaming by Rachel K. Jones. It appeared in Nightmare in October of 2023, and I'm going to preface this by saying that I bounced so hard off of this story that I think I wound up in a different time zone. But we're going to talk about it anyway. This story is a surreal political message about school shootings, the fact that children who live under the threat of the gun often grow up to wield it, and more. There's a trip to a Narnia-like world through the coat closet where the children hid to avoid the active shooter situation, a place where where they will wind up wearing the bones of their predecessors like crowns and use the magic that only children can wield. There are mice and men who want to use the children in both worlds, and there's a teacher who wears no armor but the truth. It's well written. It's beautifully, viciously, horribly well written. And like I said, I bounced so very hard off of this. I have a 15-year-old son, and we just got a message from his school 2 weeks ago saying that a gun had been confiscated on campus. And we've had a number of other issues, including the suicide of someone who was in his ROTC unit. We've had a bunch of other things that have come up, and I I understand that these are real things, but I don't necessarily want to read about them in my fiction. But I read it anyways. So, what did you guys think? And we're going to start with Sam, and then I'm going to let Andrew speak second this time.
Yeah, powerful story. Difficult to read also, but also important. I spent decades teaching in a high school. I taught
Hmm.
English, I taught art, and I taught my students how to survive a school shooting. I mean, we had to have drills regularly for that. I had
Yeah.
students go buy a gun. Um, I remember, a sheriff coming into the school and shooting blanks so we would know what the sound of a gun was down the hallway so we could recognize it. I mean,
Hmm.
it was difficult. It brought up a lot of
Mhm.
memories that I had
Yeah.
from teaching. And so much I end up having to write something in the same theme just to deal with that in a way.
Yeah.
But it's an important story to have, but it's the way that it treats it is interesting. I love the headings of it.
Hmm.
It starts off with, I'm just going to flash over here to it real quick. Starts off with the gun, and the gun is the character in the story, and then the shooter, then the teacher, and it starts out, and then the portal, and it introduces you to the elements of that. Um, it's hard to look at killing kids directly, and so we have to look at it askance, and that use of fantasy to kind
Hmm.
of interpret it is interesting, and um, it was well done, I think. And at the end, Rachel says, is writing in there that there's no happy endings when a gun is involved, and it was, yeah, I agree, it was a hard piece, but I think it's important. It was an important piece.
Andrew, how about you?
Again, I agree with a lot what Sam said. This is one of the other ones I was really fighting with is like one of my top stories this year. Um, I mean, I have not been in high school since 1993, and I always got out of college. The year I graduated college was right about when the school shooting epidemic started with Columbine and all that.
Yeah.
Basically when I left the educational system because 18 years of people trying to tell me what to think was probably enough. But this story, I love the way it's written. I love the ideas behind it. It really reminded me of a Harlan Ellison story, to be honest. It's basically, I was reading this and flashing, I was like, wow, this is like something Harlan Ellison would have written back in his prime. And the ideas behind it, and this very, very, very tragic ending. It's sort of like a terrible beauty is born type of ending with the kids coming back out of the portal because to save the rest of their classmates by sacrificing themselves and choosing to do that, even knowing what was going to happen, was just such a magnificent ending. I thought it was the perfect way to end a story like this. And it's just, I mean, I honestly, I could go on for days talking about how much I like this story. It really was it was one of my favorite stories this year. And yeah, I'm going to stop because I'm just going to keep gushing. But this story was really up my alley. Yeah, let's just leave it at that.
Okay. The cold dark heart was
Yeah,
appeased.
this is
Okay.
exactly what my cold dark heart wants. Tragedy, sublime tragedy. That's what I love.
Risa, how about you?
Like you, I bounced. Well, I should not say that I bounced hard off of it because I knew what it was going to be based on the title. So I was able to put myself in a good place for it. And the unbelievably extraordinary work that Rachel does in structuring the
Hmm.
the story was just it was so rewarding. So rewarding. And then you got to the point where these mice were manipulating the children. And that
Hmm.
was when, like, I could feel myself starting to get nauseated just at the thought, like,
Hmm.
okay, this is
Yeah.
coming, I know it's coming,
Oh,
and
yeah.
I could
Hmm.
barely finish it. But at the same
Yep.
time, there's this moment, the moment that I remember the most clearly. It was a traumatizing experience reading it, valuable, still traumatizing. Um, but there's this moment where the teacher starts telling the children, like, oh, I will cede control, but your parents, and suddenly the kids remember, oh
Hmm.
no, oh no, we will never see our parents again. And then it changes the children screaming and changes that context, flips it on his head, and talks
Hmm.
about, like, the children's sorrow for their own losses. And
Hmm.
I just realized how much this story is not just about school shootings, but also the intimate way that teachers know their students. The
Yes.
deep
I did like that.
intimacy of that relationship. And that is what I love about this story. That is the thing that I think I really treasure about this story.
Mhm. AP, how about you?
I feel like this is one of those stories that it is going to be in future anthologies as, like a topical story
Hmm.
for this time. And I think that those anthology appearances will be very well deserved.
Hmm.
And I guess I'll sort of piggyback off what Risa was saying. One of the things that has stuck with me about the story is just the strength of the love that teachers have for other
Yeah.
people's kids, and
Hmm.
how, like, I have been lucky that my kids' trauma has been stuff like they're stressed out at school and stuff, but even in that case, just the story took me back to times when this teacher or that teacher would call and, relate issues that the kid was having, and and just the amount of care that was given in pretty darn pretty darn routine situations, and then to see it in this case, you know raised to fantasy, or raised to a fantasy setting, but but not um but not sort of a fantastic emotion, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
um it just that's a thing that, like I say, has stuck with me since I read it.
All right. We're going to move on to our next story, which is Better Living Through Algorithms by Naomi Kritzer, appeared in Clarkesworld in May of 2023. In this story, a mysterious viral app connects people one to another and encourages them to live better and more fulfilling lives. Some people think this is a cult, but it instead builds actual communities of interest in health until someone uncovers that it's an AI that's been trained to do basic reminders like go to bed early through a human phone tree. Still, the human connection genuinely helps people and helps as it helps the protagonist regain art as an outlet that she's lost as a child. I liked the fact that when the mystery is solved, people basically start spamming the app. They start misusing the app. They start ignoring the app because, yeah, that's very realistic. But the space that it created in their minds is still there, where they realize that they still do need that human outlet, where they still need that human connection, and where they find their joy at is still there. And so I liked that part of the story. Is it the best story of the year? Maybe not, but I thought it was a good story. And so we're going to start this time with AP Howell. What
Yeah.
did you like or dislike about this
Um, yeah, I loved how, the magic was within us all along. It's the magic of
one?
community and connection, and people just needed this kick to see that.
Hmm.
I kept
And a
thinking,
small stakes story.
yeah, it's small stakes, and I confess I was thinking about the series Mrs. Davis,
Hmm.
which i- is a similar setup of, an AI that is that ends up controlling people, and most of them are happy about it. um but I liked that this was, this was kind of the utterly believable version of a Mrs. Davis.
Hmm.
That it's like, yeah, this social media apps take off really quickly, and then, the next week everybody's like, oh no, this is crap. you know we regret to inform you that Milkshake Duck is a racist. And so, yeah, I kind of liked it, that it's like, technically it's sci-fi, but, it's pretty realistic for, life in 2024.
Yeah, it is. Sam, how about you? What did you think about this one?
This is another one I really love. It's top three, I think, for me. But I love just the way that she writes and put it
Hmm.
together. But the statement about technology and society, and just having what if an AI really is wants your best interests, and is trying to make you live a better life. And so much like, hey, your boss is going to be gone. You can goof around a little bit. Like that's pretty cool. But I think the ending too, and the hook with art. I was an art teacher, so that hook
Yeah.
in art was really nice, and creativity. And then at the end, that they did learn something from the app, that they took something away that was deeper inside of them, and they got together anyway, and it promoted community, because that's always the fear of AI, right? That it's gonna,
Mhm.
especially social media type things, that it's gonna break us off from our community, even though it says it won't. But and here it
It
is.
was nice to see. It was nice to see a benign version of AI, just like
Mhm.
with Lincoln in the previous story with Tantie Merle.
Yeah,
It was a pleasure to see something that wasn't, it's a dystopia, it's a hellscape. So
exactly right. Yeah, I like that. That's a good connection between those two
Mhm.
stories, I think. Yeah.
yeah. Risa, how about you? What did you like about this one?
So I really love this. And the reason why I really love this is because it talks about how a lot of us are waiting for permission to do good things for ourselves. We are
Yeah.
so involved in societal expectations, and societal expectations are so pushing us to do the sacrificial thing, to sacrifice
Hmm.
for family, to sacrifice for work, to sacrifice for country, to sacrifice, etc. Versus, this app was designed to help people get permission to do the things that they want
Hmm.
to do something that is for them. And so it was kind of like an exercise in selfishness in the most positive way possible, right? There's
Yeah.
this moment where the protagonist Linnea is, talking about, well, that, they made me wear bright colors. And it's like, well, you always wear bright colors. You just don't wear them. You obviously like them.
Just buy
And,
them.
and there's this sort of like interesting, people don't take a real look at themselves. They don't
Hmm.
actually see their desires, their true, honest to goodness desires. And this is just, it's small stakes again, but
Hmm.
on such a macro level, right? Like all of
Yeah.
these humans doing all of these little things that make them happy because they didn't think they had permission to do it anymore. And I adored
Yeah.
it. I really adored it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I really enjoyed this one.
yeah. And I particularly loved that it wasn't accusing anybody of wanting to cede control, just
Hmm.
that, oh, this is an interesting thing. There's this, like decision fatigue is a thing.
Hmm.
Here, I'll help you. And,
Yeah.
and it bloomed from there. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah. Again, it's assistive technology, but in the best possible way. And Andrew, did this meet the cold dark heart test or not?
Well, beyond the fact that I'm a terribly cynical human being who's been a curmudgeon since he was 9 years old, um, one of the other things I do like in the story is when it subverts the tropes.
Yes.
And the thing that appealed to me in this story was the thing that there's a lot that did appeal to me in the story, but the thing that appealed to me the most is the way it subverted a couple of tropes. Like you have this mysterious AI that's coming in and suddenly improving everybody's lives, and automatically my brain's saying, "Ah, I've read this story. This AI is going to turn out evil. It's going to turn everybody into sheep, and it's going to be a modern retelling of To Serve Man, another Twilight Zone episode." But it didn't do that because the AI is benign. It's not doing bad things. And of course, when the human beings take it over, when the
Hmm.
human beings start getting involved in it, it ruins it. And that actually does satisfy my cold black heart. But then it does another twist on top of that. It subverts the trope again by not ending it as a sad ending, like, well, this is screwed up, and we're going to go back to our terrible lives now. No, it's actually the AI has managed to exercise or create the muscle memory in people to do these positive things in their lives,
Yes.
and they're able to do it without the AI's help,
Mhm.
which is
Yes.
another. That's another. I mean, that's another. That's not as much of a subversion as the first one, but it's still a subversion of what you'd
Hmm.
expect to happen in the story. And I like that kind of. I like it when I see that kind of thing in a story. I mean,
Yeah.
this one is a little too. This is a little bit. I don't know if it's like competency porn or technology porn. It's a little bit of that for me, where it's just like, it's a little, there's a little bit of that, but I still really enjoyed the subversion of the tropes that I saw in the story, in the story structure and the plot structure in this one, because that kind of thing, it engages me when you don't do something that you normally would expect to see in a story. It engages my mind. Oh, I got to be paying attention to this, because I can't just skim the next 3 paragraphs because I know exactly what's going to happen in all of them, because I don't. And this
This
story,
was definitely a comforting story, and I really needed to read this one after Rachel's story. So, yeah,
no, I mean,
I agree with everything. I agree with everything that everybody said. Yeah.
yeah, it's a good.
Um, yeah. And finally, we've got Bad Doors by John Wiswell. Uncanny, January and February of 2023. And this one, I have to ask you guys to help guide me in the story because a lot of it's told by inference. So I'm going to be looking for you guys to help me understand it better. So the way I have understood it is during the height of COVID, Cosmo finds a door in his house, painted burgundy with a square knob. He knows instinctively that it's bad news. He refuses to go through it, and his cousin's dog finds snakeskin outside of it. He moves across the state, taking a loss on the sale of the house, and the door vanishes there, only to appear in his new house. He flees with his cousin's dog. His lacquer cousin disappears through the door. Cosmo takes every precaution to avoid infection with COVID and to avoid seeing the door again, even going so far as to sell his new house to buy an RV with walls too small for the door to appear on. His uncle, who's a COVID doubter and a vaccine conspiracist and everything else, also doubts the door and summons him to prove that the door exists. Cosmo refuses, taking a stand against his uncle's anti-vax rants and his lack of belief in the door. This story is clearly a metaphor for something, and I'm clearly not getting it. So we're going to start with Andrew, since we were talking about this before the podcast began, and you can continue on with your thoughts.
Well, it's just, I don't think John Wiswell has written a sentence I didn't like yet that I've read.
Yeah. Oh, it's
I've
well
never.
written. I'm not
Oh
getting
yeah.
it.
I mean, I don't think John's capable of not writing well. And as far as what it is, it's just sort of, I like the idea. I was like, I don't know. I mean, I'm with you. I don't actually see what the connection is between the Red Door and the pandemic. I don't see specifically what the connection is. Like, it doesn't seem to necessarily track in my head, but it doesn't bother me so much. Actually, it doesn't
Okay.
bother me at all. I like the fact that it's like, because it's Cosmo's reaction to both things are the same. He's
Hmm.
he basically he's seeing this magical door that appears everywhere, and it's kind of like, oh, this is going to be the start of the adventure, and Cosmo's like, nope, not doing it. Sorry, I'm leaving. I'm out. And his reaction to the pandemic, as portrayed in the story, is the same way. So
Hmm.
it's a similarity in his reaction to both of them that connects them in my head. Is the connection between? I mean, the connection. Again, the connection is how he reacts to it. The connection is not in the two things themselves.
Okay.
There possibly could be one. I'm not a very good reader. I do not read fantasy unless it's somebody gives it to me to read, or it's a friend or something like that. Because fantasy's not my thing. So there's entirely. I was reading this entirely thinking, you know what? There is probably a story out there that he's referring to, a famous fantasy story of something. I've just never read it. So therefore, there could be an inference. But I assume that the rest of you've probably read more fantasy than me. And if you're not seeing it either, then it probably isn't one, and it's basically just what I've said before about Cosmo's reaction as a connection.
Risa, help me.
I will help you.
What do you see here?
Okay, so here's the deal. What we have is a situation in which you've got a haunted house. You've got a
Hmm.
haunted house. This is sort of the inversion of Open House on Haunted Hill.
Okay.
This is, you don't go in, in movies, everybody goes
Mhm.
into the goddamn haunted house. Everybody goes into the goddamn
Yes.
Blair Witch basement,
Yes, they do.
right? And this is a reversion of this and saying, like, no, this is going to be a character who does not, under any circumstances, engage with the haunted house. They leave. They leave, they leave, they leave.
Mhm.
And the reason why it's on top of the pandemic is because so many people refused to believe the pandemic was real. They wanted
They
to
went into the
go,
house.
they wanted to go into the haunted house. right? The
Okay.
virus is that haunted house, that evil thing that's there and ready to eat them. They're like, no, surely not me. Boom, you got it, right? Like it is such a powerful parallel. It's not as far as I'm aware, it is not an inference to one other story. It's an inference to all of the other haunted house stories
I love
in
your
which
explanation
somebody
here.
actually
This
goes
is helping me
in.
see things so much better.
Yeah,
Thank you.
like last year, I don't know if you read Dick Pig.
I did.
Yeah.
So
Oh, that one changed me how I see horror forever.
right, and but he just goes. He goes and he engages. He decides, like, yep, I'm giving up. It is equivalent to I am giving myself to the virus. And so that's John flipping the script and saying, like, no, Cosmo is saying no. Cosmo's saying no to the haunted house. Cosmo
Okay.
will be that final girl. Cosmo is gonna live.
Okay. I
Mhm.
love this explanation. Thank you so
You're
much.
welcome.
Sam, do you have a similar explanation, or do you see it a different way? Or
No, I mean, I saw the door as sort of the ignorance and indifference to the pandemic. I mean, I love the haunted house thing too. That's all, because I totally see that as well. But that that for me was because the cousin also, right, is like, I wonder what's in there, and then he disappears, which I took as a death through pandemic. Like he lost his cousin to this thing,
yeah.
and the uncle wants it. He wants the door, so he wants to go through it. He wants to make money off of it. He wants to exploit it or whatever. For me, it was just sort of that. It did relate to the pandemic in that sense, in terms of
Okay.
how you are you gonna are you gonna walk through the door. Yeah, that and I love the haunted
Okay.
house that Risa was saying. Yeah.
That's
Yeah, no,
beautiful.
yeah, I think that was a great way to sort of summarize what was going on, um, and also sort of following up on the pandemic. It's also saying basically so many people, they're watching a horror movie and they're like, oh, I'm so genre savvy, I would not go in the haunted house. Um, and sort of the story's asking, okay, well then why the hell are you eating out?
Yeah.
um and and um and I also like this, like that this is not a case just of a door that makes Cosmo feel weird, that he knows something's going wrong, but then there is continued evidence presented
hmm
that no, this door is bad news. And so
The snake's
he's
getting outside of it again.
exactly, so
Dog is eating it.
yeah, my cousin went in and did not come out, so
Yeah.
he is the person who is behaving entirely rational, in an
hmm
entirely rational fashion, even if
I
no
see you,
one
Sam.
else
One
gets
moment.
it. Yeah. Mhm.
Go for it, Sam.
Also, like if you have a haunted house, I like that, and you have a protagonist who doesn't go into it. Do you have a story? I mean, but John makes a story out of it because
Yeah.
Yes, he
the
does.
it's following you,
Yeah, the
right?
haunted
It's
house
following.
follows. Like, I think
Mhm.
that's amazing. Like, no, sorry, we're gonna keep going. We're gonna find you. And you're like, nope, I'm running. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, Andrew, what did you have to
Yeah.
say?
Well, I was just curious going with the haunted house idea, as far as how the analogy works. Would it be more the toxic humanity that came out during the pandemic, or the pandemic itself? Because saying that you have a choice about whether you get COVID or not doesn't seem to be the way it works.
Oh, you
I
want to
don't.
go first,
I
AV? I'll go after you.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I think it's more about it's about what price are you willing to pay to
hmm
keep yourself safe. And there's sort of a range of that, of like
hmm
the uncle is fully in denial and
hmm
has complete other priorities, but Cosmo is going, he is, you know he is remaining in lockdown. He's
hmm
yeah, and I think that's, at least that's I didn't see it as much of as much of a victim blamey story as just a, like, you know being smart versus being
The kids
reckless.
the kids on the field, right? They're all the
Yeah.
families are playing, and the
Mhm.
kid gets hurt, and everybody rushes around them. So there's different levels of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There, I think it's not about whether or not you catch COVID, right? It's not whether or not you have the disease. It is whether or not you will engage in self-harming behaviors.
Yes.
I don't know if you know the term bug chaser. You're about the same
Mm.
age as me. This might have been something that you encountered in the mid 90s, but there were people when when HIV was a big thing, where they would actually seek out people who were not
Yeah.
HIV positive, would seek out people who are HIV positive
Mhm.
and be like, I can catch this, I can beat this. This is something that is just human behavior. And so in this context, this is like, there are people who, even though they know that COVID is really horrible, would be like, I'm just going to go ahead and have dinner with my family, even though I know that this is there and it is likely I will either infect people or get infected myself. Right? Like, what was it? Chickenpox parties?
Oh yeah.
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 Oh yeah. I think
Right?
my mom steadfastly denies that she ever did the chickenpox thing to me when I was a kid. But I kind of remember being at the daycare with a bunch of other kids with really bad acne for 5 years old. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
she
So
denies she did it, but
yeah, so I think it's that, right? It is that aspect. It is a combination of toxic humanity and behavior that puts other people in danger. Not
okay.
it
So
doesn't.
it is more about the mentality and less about the disease itself that Cosmo's actively avoiding.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that makes
So
sense.
thank you all for very much for helping me understand this one, because I knew I was missing something vital, and I knew it was fabulously well written, and I knew that there was just something that I was not grasping. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate the quick giving me the notes basically. So
Yeah.
I apparently missed class that day. All right, so what's coming up next for each of you? We're going to start at the top with Andrew. What is going on with you?
Well, I have 2 books coming out this year. Strangely enough, I don't seem to want to space these out better. On at the end of May, on May 20th, I have my first short story collection coming out, as you mentioned, called "Signals in the Static," being put out by Lethe Press. 18 stories that have been published in various magazines, and 14 previously published stories and 4 brand new stories, which is just a nice way of saying I couldn't get anybody to accept them. And then in the next issue of Analog Magazine, my debut novel, "The Last Days of Good People," is going to be published in Analog Magazine, which is kind of a crazy thing to think of. They don't generally publish novels, but apparently he really liked it. And it's also last Friday I signed a deal for an audiobook for the last Days of Good People, which will be coming out sometime after August. It's coming out from Dreamscape,
Very
and
nice.
Jabberwocky Print is going to be doing an ebook probably around the same time in August. So I have
Wow.
2 books coming out,
Nice.
and
In various formats and forms. This is
yes,
awesome.
I know. And the book was a total accident. The novel that's going to be an analog, it was an accident. I didn't actually intend to write a novel. It just sort of like it was a
Going.
novella that got away from me, I
You
guess.
just you just tripped and fell on the keyboard.
Well, it's kind of like I was writing. It was what I did during the pandemic, and I wrote it, and I was just like, okay, this is going to be about 18,000 words. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. I blew past 18,000 words. Okay, it's going to be about 24,000 words. It's 24,000 words. It'll be fine. Blew right past that, and I was like, okay, it's going to be 32,000 words. That's good. That's it. Can't get much longer than that. And I blew. I got to about 37,000 words. I was like, okay, I don't care how long. It's just going to be as long as it is. I don't even know anymore. And it ended up first draft being 55,000 words, which is
Okay.
technically a novel, but a problematically short novel, but
Yes.
still a novel.
Nice.
I love that. Risa, what's up next for you?
That's a good question. I actually don't have anything coming up, but I will say that my story, Delicate Situations, from our last conversation, is out in paperback soon, available
Ooh,
from Pulse Publishing in 99 Fleeting Fantasies, which you can find online and
again,
available.
toss me the link. I think
Mhm.
you tossed me the link last time
Yep,
from, I think it was an Amazon link, but
yep,
toss it to me again, please.
absolutely, absolutely.
Sam, how about you? What do you have coming out soon or out recently that you'd like to talk about?
Well, I have a piece coming out in that Strange Locations anthology of dark travel guides, which is published through Apex. That should be.
Mm-hmm.
I signed the contract for that. A couple pieces, small pieces with stupefying stories, and then penumbric speculative fiction. I have a piece coming out, so some short fiction. I'm working on novella and a novel at this now. So hopefully
Sounds
that'll. Let's see. It's a novella, but like Andy, it will probably expand. I don't know. We'll see.
It happens with.
You
I mean,
know.
I don't know about you, but I've written 100-word text to people, so it's not really that surprising.
AP, how about you?
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat of in terms of I've got some things that I know are going to be longer, but I'm not sure how long, and I'm sort of cycling between them. Um, the next thing that I have coming out is a science fiction novelette that is going to be out from Parsec, the UK zine. Um,
Mhm.
Probably in one of the issues this year, but I'm not sure exactly when. But at some point, the probability waves will collapse, and that'll be out.
Nice.
Well, I have a novella in verse coming out soon. It's called Xenoforming. I have just gotten the art for the cover, and I am getting the blurbs together so that I will be self-publishing this one. So it's going to be really pretty, and everybody who's read it so far has gone, "Ooh, this is really good, Deborah." Like, well, thank you very much. I wish that we had had more success in the last 2 years trying to sell it, but we'll sell it directly to people now, and it will do as well as poetry ever does, which is, well, that's another story. Thank you all for having been on the show. It was a pleasure speaking with each of you, and thank you to the listeners for joining us. Be sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to help me placate the algorithm. And then join me next week with Lee Harlan, Brent Lambert, and Alan Diane Shapiro as we cover the Nebulas again, this time in the novelette category. Thank you again, and we are out.